want to go ahead and get us started on time. I'm Sarah Goody. I'm the Real Property Section Manager with Housing and Community Services for the City of Wichita. And just want to welcome each of you who are here today. This is a brand new board, and so we're excited to have you here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being streamed live as well as recorded on Teams. That is an option for virtual attendance. Logan is monitoring for any comments or questions from beyond the room. And so just want to let all board members know this is a live and public meeting. And so again, thank you so much to each of you for being here. And with that, our first action of business, welcome and introduction. And our next is swearing in. And so I'd like to invite our city clerk, Buster, to perform that oath of office.
Pass out everybody's oaths. There will be two forms that you'll sign after we do the oaths, the front page and I believe the third page. So I'll need those two documents back. And I will need to see Anthony. Anthony, can you enable your video?
Is Anthony online?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second.
Sorry, let me escape out of the presentation. There we go. All ready to go there. Okay. Okay, and do we need Anthony on camera?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got it.
Okay, if everybody could please raise your right hand for me and just repeat after me. I state your name. Solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States
solemnly swear to support the Constitution and
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
the Constitution
and faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge
of the Affordable Housing Review Board
of the Affordable Housing Review Board,
for the City of Wichita, Kansas, so help me God.
City of Wichita, Kansas, so help me God.
All right, Anthony, you were on mute, but I saw your lips moving the whole time, so that counts. All right.
Sorry about that.
Anthony, I will mail your paperwork to you and I'll just need you to sign it and send it back to me.
Okay.
Take oath. Oh, 1 and 2, right? Oh, that one.
One be late.
2 pages is fine. And your acceptance letter. Oh, okay.
Okay. And we'll give our board members just a few moments to fill out their paperwork. Thank you. And so as those who have the agenda in front of them can see, the purpose of the Affordable Housing Review Board is to provide professional expertise and community perspective in the evaluation of proposals for affordable housing programming, as well as recommendations for funding. The board advises the city council and city staff on affordable housing matters, and the board shall incorporate principles of equity into its decision-making to properly serve the city's minority communities. And so with that in mind, our next item is roll call and board and staff introductions. And so what I'd like to do in lieu of a formal roll call is to just go around the table, starting with Miranda, and have each board member provide a brief introduction as well as just what is some of your background and experience that pertains to the mission of this board. And so we'll start with Miranda and go around the room and end with me.
I'm Miranda Penner. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway PenFed Realty. I'm interested in learning more about affordable housing review and the process. I was actually a recipient of this about 20 years ago in Colorado. Purchased, it was technically my second house, brand new build, was able to see how that worked from one angle. Now I get to see how it works from another angle. I also have investment properties and deal with property management, show rental houses. I can't wait to learn more about more things that I can offer from a sales side. We also build and remodel homes, so I'm in it to be more involved with this fund.
John Todd, I came to Wichita in 1965 selling building materials, all on our contractors, architects, builders. Got acquainted with people in the housing industry. 1976, I became licensed real estate broker. Was active for 30 years. I've been retired for about 15 years. During retirement, particularly, I've been following the land bank, come to those meetings. It's been time at the Board of Code Standards and Appeals, following what they're doing over there. My personal interest is promote affordable housing for entry level folks as a means of creating wealth for themselves. I believe self-sufficiency is gained through participation in the real estate market as an owner. Thanks for inviting me to be here.
I'm Brad Snap. I'm currently the owner of a startup called Verity Wood. Specializes in culinary art, small business. Prior to that, I was intimately involved in affordable housing for many, many years. I worked in Sedgwick County and City of Wichita.
Stacy Meyer. I currently work for Emprise Bank. For the past 20 years, I've been in banking and financing, primarily in the residential real estate. So I have a lot of experience with credit, underwriting, and so forth, and working programs offered by municipalities and other government programs. Now work in wealth management, but certainly look forward to having an impact on this community alongside all of you for affordable housing needs.
My name is Valerie Black. I'm with the Kansas Health Foundation, and I've been with them for 21 years. I am Community Impact Officer, so I also work with the community particulars. District 1, that's the area that I grew up in. We know that affordable housing helps make a healthy community, and so that is my interest. I also served on the Wichita Affordable Housing Advisory Committee regarding the ARPA dollars. So.
Hello, my name is Saban Collier, and I have a background as a mortgage broker back in several years ago. And also recently I've been brought back into the real estate world with property management and selling off market properties to investors. And I also help coach people credit, how to credit utilization, how to restore and build their credit, and working alongside some other organizations to provide financial literacy and credit for the marginalized community to help them build generational wealth in real estate. So I also was serving on the on the land bank. And when the opportunity came to transition over here, it just, to me, sounded more like a great opportunity to make an impact, learning how this process works so that I can, better help serve our community and provide them with the resources they need to improve our level of homeownership, lower income. So.
And are we able to get Anthony on audio? Is that Anthony?
Yeah, you could hear us earlier.
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Anthony Gallardo. I participated. I'm new to Wichita. I've been here for about a year. Came from California, and I've helped shape affordable housing policies over there by working with numerous assembly members, senators. I worked with Kamala Harris before she was a vice president. My employment background, I've mainly been in tech, so I've always helped create like portals and forums where people who want to achieve affordable housing could apply for it and have that system feed into the city or government system in order to keep track of applicants and process them in a timely manner. I currently work for a tech company that specializes in virtual reality. And I'm essentially like a software developer. I've been developing software since I graduated college about 3 years ago. So for about 3 years.
So thank you to each of you for contributing your time and your experience, your knowledge, and your community representation to this board. And so with that, I wanted to introduce the staff team as well. Do we want to start with Brian or with Roger?
Be the main law connection for the board, and I do things with housing sometimes as well. So I'll be sitting in upon request.
My name is Roger Burright. I'm staff with the Housing and Community Services. I'm a program specialist. Right now I'm in the Public Housing Division. I also attend or part of the staff with Wichita Land Bank. Housing.
My name is Logan Bradshaw, and I'm the Assistant Department Director for the Department of Housing and Community Services.
I'm Sally Stang. I'm the Department Director, Housing and Community Services.
Hey, Johnson, I'm with the Law Department. I guess I'll be doing most of the legal services. Thanks for, yeah, thank you so much for being.
And it's on record too.
Your name?
Nate Johnson.
And I'm Sarah Gooding. I'm the Real Property Section Manager within Housing and Community Services. And so this is actually a new section that's been created within the department to focus specifically on affordable housing units. And so programs within this that are all woven together now include the Affordable Housing Fund, the home programs, the public housing, especially as we look toward disposition of those units, our home repair program space, and also our land bank, which is another board and a startup within the department. And so I'll be your staff liaison throughout these meetings, the person to communicate with. And so again, that's your staff team. And actually the next meeting, we should have 2 additional to introduce as well. So we'll look forward to that. So what we wanted to do next was just a quick program overview of what is the board and what are some of the programs the board will really interface with and what is that role. So if you look actually at the bottom of your stack, you'll find a sheet that looks like this. It says 2023 federal adjusted income limits. And so when we talk about affordable housing, this is really what we're looking at and basing everything on. There are a number of different levels of income limits, and our programs are at different levels based on the program. And so you'll hear us refer to things as we present on these programs that we work with this board. And so I wanted you to have that as a frame of reference. These are guidelines that are set outside of us by HUD. And what they do is they calculate what the median household income is for different household sizes. And then our programs really target 30%, 50%, 60%, and 80%. And so that's a handy guide to what we're talking about and what we mean when we talk about those different income levels. And so 3 programs that really will come through this board for proposal review and evaluation are the Affordable Housing Fund, the Home Program, and especially the Housing Development Loan Program. And then another thing that is kind of a one-time deal is the Home American Rescue Plan. And so we'll share just a little bit about each of those programs. And also I'm glad to take questions. We do have quite a bit of material we're trying to cover during this hour. So I want to keep things moving so that we don't squeeze out time later in the meeting. And so the Affordable Housing Fund, and I have to really give kudos to Logan and Sally because they've done a lot of the legwork. I'm fairly new here, and so they are truly the program experts. But this was $5 million allocated originally from COVID relief money and through a series of negotiations, we've actually been able to receive those funds free and clear of federal restrictions, which has allowed us to align our plans and guidelines closer to some of our other programs. So the goal of this fund is to improve the quality of existing housing stock, to expand quality affordable housing options, and especially to promote neighborhood stability in Wichita's core. And we know coming out of COVID that those are areas that were very hard hit, and we saw a lot of impact of housing instability. And so again, there were $5 million allocated for this fund, and we will really prioritize projects that leverage the existing public housing stock, especially that falls within what we call qualified census tracts, QCTs, and also the established central area, ECA. And so this is also kind of a quick primer on the different abbreviations and terms that we use, and we have a lot of those in the housing world. So I put a map in here to make it more visual than just conceptual. And so the fund, really the focus areas serves areas that were disproportionately impacted by housing insecurity. And so your HUD qualified census tracts are these areas that are shaded in the blue-gray color. And then we also have overlaid this map with areas that were formerly redlined. We know that there are intergenerational impacts in real estate from areas that were at one time deemed to be hazardous or declining. And so a lot of our work really focuses within those same areas today. The Affordable Housing Fund is not something that individuals can access directly. It's really designed to be accessed by developers through a request for proposals process. And so the developers will be able to apply for the funds and then administer the program funds to individuals who are applicants through their programs. And that can include single-family renovation or rehabilitation for home buyers or renters, home rehab for existing low-income homeowners, or new construction. And so, as I said earlier, our goal is also to administer as many of these policies in alignment as possible. And so we're grateful to be able to really align this program with some of our other existing programs. And that makes it easier on the staff as we do review. It makes it easier to explain into the community, and it makes it easier for you as a board to understand the different program policies and what we're really looking for. And so I wanted to turn it over to Logan to share a little bit about the Housing Development Loan Program.
So as Sarah mentioned, next we'll talk about the Housing Development Loan Program. You're going to hear us reference it as HDLP. As Sarah mentioned, we live in a world of acronyms. So I think I'm covering about 3 acronyms in my section. HDLP is enabled by the Home Investment Partnerships Program, or the HOME program, we call it. HOME is an entitlement grant that we receive on an annual basis from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And the ultimate purpose of HOME is to create affordable housing, which is also essentially the goal of the HDLP program. HDLP works to achieve this goal by providing gap financing for the development of affordable housing for low to moderate income families. Sarah pointed out the federal adjusted income limit. And so what that means is that for the HDLP program, individual households' income cannot exceed 80% of the area median income. So you can see for a family of 4, their income will not be able to exceed just over $68,000. So for HDLP, projects that are subsidized with HDLP can be either new construction or rehabilitation projects. And these funds are accessed by 4 or nonprofit housing developers, which can include what we call CHODOs, or community housing development organizations. CHODOs are nonprofit community organizations that have staff with demonstrated capacity to develop affordable housing for the community they serve. In order to designate or qualify for what we call CHODO designation, the organization has to meet certain requirements pertaining to their legal status, their organizational structure, and then lastly, they have to have demonstrated capacity and experience operating within the community that they serve. We are required by HUD to ensure that not less than 15% of our home funds on an annual basis are awarded to CHODOs. And so what that means for this board is that we will manage that CHODO set-aside requirement through our Housing Development Loan Program, or our HDLP program. And so when an organization puts in for HDLP funds, if they've never designated as a CHODO before, but feel that they are a CHODO, they can go through the designation process prior to putting in an application for HDLP funds with our department. If they have designated as a CHODO in the past and they still have to recertify when they're using HDLP funds, any home funding. And so they will go through that recertification process within the HDLP application. And so we do accept applications for HDLP on a rolling basis until we commit all of our program year funds. And then once all of our funds have been conditionally committed or committed to organizations, we will then take that application down until we receive additional funds for the next program year. Excuse me. We do currently have applications open for the current program year. We have an application up for multifamily rental projects, as well as single-family homeownership projects. Applications will first be reviewed by us and then brought to you for review and consideration. We'll work with the applicant if their application isn't substantially complete, or if there's other things that they might need to submit in conjunction to make sure that when we bring it to you, it's a full and complete application that's ready for you. And then whatever recommendation you make will then be brought to the City Council for ultimate decision-making and consideration. And we'll let Sally talk about our American Rescue Plan, our home ARP funding.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So we're really excited. This was the first year ever, last year, I should say, was the first year ever. HUD put out money through the home funds. It came from the American Rescue Plan Act, but it was very specifically to target people experiencing homelessness or other vulnerable populations, such as those fleeing domestic violence or human trafficking. And so as part of that, we did receive just over $5.5 million in home ARP funds. And we have until 2026 to obligate those funds and until 2030 to fully expend them. But as everyone knows, we have a tremendous need for assistance for those vulnerable populations. And it is our goal to commit and expend those funds much sooner than that. We went through pretty much a 9-month planning process. So one of the requirements in order for us to actually receive the funds from HUD, we had to consult stakeholders and create a home ARP plan. And we decided that rather than just check the minimum requirements and check the boxes to create that plan, we looked at it as an opportunity to take a really deep dive into our homeless ecosystem to try and evaluate what changes needed to occur in order for us to try and reach functional zero and end homelessness in our community. And so we put out an RFP and we hired a consultant, Development Strategies, Inc. They worked with us and did a lot of legwork and data analysis and worked with our partners in the community. And we came up with a plan. And it's what I call swinging for the fences on this. It is our goal that we want to be able to use the home ARP funds to develop a single project that actually creates low barrier shelter, non-congregate shelter, congregate shelter, which is not allowed to be funded with home ARP, but we recognize it needs to be there, rental housing units, and a coordinated service center, a navigation center. I'd love if someone came up with a term for this because everybody calls it something else. It's like, is it the homelessness service center? Is it the navigation hub? So we need to come up with a consistent verbiage that we're using for that. So that plan, obviously $5.5 million is not going to cut it. We're actually looking at spending about $30 million to create this project. We've recently issued an RFQ process and did interviews of development partners for a developer partner to work with us. And we'll be bringing in a national homelessness consultant to work with us to help us identify appropriate location, scope, partners, et cetera. So this is a really exciting opportunity. We're hoping to enter into a contract with the selected development partner in the next few weeks, and we'll be bringing that to council hopefully by the end of July so that we can start down that path. It's really exciting. But we did write into this program kind of a plan B. If we can't make plan A happen within a year of the approval of our plan, we would then enter into an RFP process to allocate those funds to organizations to do one of these allowable items, one or more, I should say, which is create low barrier housing focused non-congregate shelter, affordable housing rental units, or and/or coordinated supportive services. So that gives us a year to try and pull off what I call the home run. If we can't pull off the home run, we will make that funding available to our other partners in our community. If we get to that point, which will be a very sad day in my world, those applications would be brought to this board. Okay, so that's where it kind of ties into this board, is that's when that could possibly happen. So, and I think next we have back to Sarah.
But only briefly. And so really the scope of all the work together is that as staff, we take the applications, we vet things, we administrate them, but then we really bring them to you for your review, for your questions, for your recommendation and decision makings as far as which ones should be funded and what are the best uses of that funding. Because we know that any sort of public funding is limited and has to be used wisely. And so this board will be the one making the decisions what to recommend to council from those different programs and different applications. And so one of the things we wanted to do with this being our initial meeting was to take some time and work through the legalities of what is this board and what does it do. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate. All my papers.
And I'm just kind of up here. I don't actually have anything all that much to present. The one thing that you might find there is a copy of draft bylaws. We can try to consider, oh, yeah, no, please go take my spot too. So just vacated, so perfect timing. So a couple things to go over, and these are all going to really tie together. So I'll try to get through it as efficiently as possible. First thing is to look at the Affordable Housing Review Board ordinance. Really well drafted ordinance. No, it's just something we put together. And it lays out most of how this board's going to operate. You'll see that the bylaws really track what the ordinance says as well. A few things that I wanted to bring everyone's attention to, and you should have a copy of the board's operative ordinance as well that Sarah provided. So a big thing from the purpose, we're going to evaluate proposals. That's in the first sentence. Then we are advising city council and staff on the matters that come before this board. And a big thing that's not common in a lot of different boards is this last sentence about incorporating principles of equity into decision. There's not a lot more there in the purpose, but that's kind of up for this board to consider and decide and put into practice. At 1182, it's really kind of the meat of what this board is going to be doing, but it was really laid out well in the prior presentation. You'll notice in section 1, we've got the board shall review applications, then it's got the different programs that we just talked about. We've got the Affordable Housing Fund, a few different home-related actions, a housing development loan program, American Rescue Plan related projects, as well as the community housing development organization set-asides for housing development. Number 2 under 1182 is recommending to city council funding recommendations, the exact kind of proposals that we review on this board. And then if city council does want to provide additional authority, that is within their purview, and then this board takes on that responsibility as time goes on. 1183 lays out a lot of like the organizational mechanics of the board. This is the stuff that tracks the ordinance. Oh, I'm sorry. This is what will track the bylaws a lot as well. And really, it's like this is an appointed board. You've gone through that part. We'll do some other swearing ins, I think, a little bit later too. The interesting thing, I think, in this section is subsection 2, where it clearly lays out that an intention of this board is to take into consideration neighborhood or community, kind of like really localized input, potentially. Through neighborhood advisory committees or other city advisory committees. So this is kind of a unique function of this board. Most boards have the authority, right, to make ad hoc committees, but there's a little bit more specific direction in the ordinance to focus maybe on some geographical considerations and make some ad hoc committees that way. Once we start trying to do that, we can send any questions my way, make sure we do it all appropriately and things like that as we start looking at some of these applications. Section 3 might look a little bit weird. It talks about how appointments are made. This is something that we put in most board ordinances. It basically recognizes that when we've got a new elected, that new elected is able to appoint a new board member, even if it doesn't fall along our normal lines. And that's just kind of something electeds do for each other, both incumbents and new folks coming in to kind of recognize that once you're elected, you should be able to appoint. That's something to kind of just keep in touch with whoever appointed you about, I think, in understanding which district you came from. But I don't think it's anything immediate. I just wanted to note that because it's kind of some weird language there. Otherwise, we just refer to city code. It's kind of some generic ordinance pieces that we have for boards, advisory boards. And if you have any questions, that's what I'm here for. So any issues that we might have with qualifications for the board, the big thing really I do want to note in the code is attendance. There's not a lot of reasons to be removed from the board written into the city code. The big one, though, is attending meetings regularly and not missing more than 3 meetings a year. Try to stay in touch, all the practical stuff, stay in touch with everybody and staff and all of that. But from a legal perspective, that is one thing that can really affect your membership on the board is continued attendance at meetings. We've got some organizational stuff, which we'll talk about too. We've got a chairperson and vice chairperson, and you'll maybe notice when we get to the bylaws, I refer to it as president and vice president. I will change that with the draft to follow the code, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We've got some open meetings information, which you'll also notice is on the agenda a little bit later that I'll get to. We have a quorum when we've got a majority of people. When we've got a quorum, that's when we can act, just like any other kind of board. And then we'll adopt some bylaws and get going, and that's the last piece of the ordinance there. I went through it relatively quick, but I think it's a fairly straightforward board structure. It's how we try to structure a lot of the boards in the city. And again, if you've got questions, please feel free to ask me at any time or connect with Sarah, and she'll send questions my way. So I think that leads us right into bylaws, which you'll see really is just kind of the same sort of stuff that was in the ordinance. And we're kind of kicking around whether to even make bylaws with how this board will track the ordinance lot. But I think it is nice to have kind of a foundational document for this body to then refer to, kind of just a basic sort of rules document for everybody. So the creation refers to the basic ordinance, the city code provisions that we went through just before. The purpose is the exact same as the purpose that's in the ordinance. Membership and terms. I condensed all of the information that's in the ordinance into this bylaws section. I won't go through it again here. And if you've got, again, questions about specifics, like, you can't be an officer you can't be on for more than 8 years, or what are the number of consecutive terms? How does this affect officership? Stuff like that. I think that'd be better. Just ask me questions as it comes up. We don't need to go through all that technicality here. If we do have vacancies, we have a procedure set up for that as well. If that's something that you need to do and move off the board, just let us know and we'll try to figure out filling the vacancy. The powers and duties of the board through the bylaws track exactly what's in the code. So the exact same thing now we've gone through twice. Otherwise, officers is kind of an important point. And I will note the reason it's important is because we did not swear in everybody today. So we can do officer elections today, which again is a specific thing on the agenda, but something for consideration by everybody too. And I just don't know how it's going to shake out, who wants to do what position and everything, and if we're all like cool, who's going to do what. But since not everybody's sworn in, we can also consider doing electing officers at the next meeting as well. This board is empowered to act without bylaws, basically. You can act by a majority. We don't have anything on the agenda to act on today. But if we didn't get bylaws in place, even if we didn't get officers in place, we can continue to act by majority on things on the agenda. The one kind of thing to consider here, our city code for this board says we only need a chairperson and a vice chairperson. One thing, I don't know if we need a second vice chairperson. Some boards have that as another fallback. I just wanted to bring it to folks' attention. I'm probably going to default in the next draft to actually present to the board for voting at the next meeting to just have a chairperson and vice chairperson, which is in the city code. But if anybody has issues with that, and I think with just 7 people, if we're missing like 2 or 3 folks, we're going to have quorum issues anyway. So it just kind of depends on what the board would like to do in that regard. And then I would remove information about what the second vice president would do as well. The board will obviously be assisted by a lot of wonderful folks in the Housing and Community Services Department that's recognized here. And I believe Sarah will be functioning basically as secretary and taking minutes when you're not functioning as president, more or less, and trying to run a chairperson and run the meeting and everything at the same time as well. Legal services provided by me or Brian, depending on what comes up, and then we'll just continue to act according to code. Another thing is on the meetings and procedures, and I just have some basic language on when our regular meetings are going to be, but is this, and I just kind of, this is kind of weird just to step back, but the big question for me would be, is this when we are going to regularly hold meetings? Should we do so monthly? Does today work for folks? Would we be able to reserve this spot? Maybe we should do kind of a poll to get people's availability. But I just kind of wanted to step back for a minute because that's a big thing kind of just to set up in the bylaws, just to kind of talk about and discuss amongst everybody. Or we can kind of do that later if we wanted to send around a sort of like planning email. I'm sorry, I gave you 0 heads up on that, Sarah, sorry.
I should step back to the mic just for recording purposes. Actually, the meeting times and schedules probably is one of the big things that we should deliberate as a board. And I don't know that we'll have a conclusive decision today. With many other boards, it's very nice to have regularly established meeting times. It makes reserving the room and public notice simple. One of the things with this board, though, is that proposals may be coming through at any time and sometimes may be time sensitive. And so within that, we have some latitude in terms of whether we want to set regular meetings, but then cancel if we don't have business, or add meetings as we do have extra business. And so my recommendation would not necessarily be to settle on a decision today, as much as to take it home, to think on it, and to bring ideas back to when we set our next meeting in that regard. So.
Yeah, so everybody, I guess, kind of give it some thought as we go through, but something that's built in here too is we do have special meeting authority. So even if we set something regular, and I think that would be kind of the smoothest way is if we have a regular time for everybody to have on the calendar, we can totally cancel meetings as long as we provide notice to the public. And I guess notice if, we're not here as well, ultimately, but we can try to set meetings as necessary as well. And I tried to make it relatively simple to call special meetings too. The president can do that, or a majority of the board, as long as we have a time in place. So really the big thing, as Sarah mentioned, is just kind of, do we think we should have monthly meetings? When would be a good time to do so? What kind of works for your schedule? And kind of a preview to Open Meetings Act information. Don't email the whole group this information, even though meeting schedule is kind of a exception, but good practice, do not email the whole group. Let's email kind of specifically to one person on staff, so then we're not drawing in the whole board basically and risking making a meeting. Just a little preview for some of the open meeting stuff in a minute. Open meetings is referenced in this meetings and procedure section. City policy allows public participation, but there are some rules in here for how long the public can speak. If we do have it, we can allow, president can allow folks to speak as long as they want. It's a 5-minute limit in here. It kind of depends who shows up. It's just good to kind of have something in the bylaws, sometimes depending on the number of folks and public participation. But the president can set rules depending on the meeting to establish civility, decorum process, things like that as well. We have Robert's Rules of Orders, which I've got some notes on and can chime in on as necessary if we have issues like that through meetings. It's good to have an agenda. Sarah's great about getting everything put together, and that's how this board is going to operate. But we don't technically, under state law, need an agenda to do things. We just try to provide as much notice to the public as possible of when our meetings are going to be, so that everybody can at least be here, even if we don't have an agenda. But we do try to, of course, have an agenda that helps the meeting flow a little better, provides more information to the public, which is a big thing of what we're trying to do, engage the community to review and make recommendations to council based on that. Some quorum and voting information. The big thing here, quorum is a majority. So if we do not have a majority of the board present at a meeting, no action can be taken. And on the flip side, if 4 of you accidentally ran into each other and started talking about business that could be before the board, that counts as a meeting too. that's kind of the open meetings issues that I'll talk about in a little bit. But when we have quorum, which will be 4, since we've got 7 on this board, we've got a majority. Then as long as we've got quorum, a majority vote of that quorum is necessary to take action. So theoretically, we could have 4 people present, a majority would be 3. So if 3 members would vote for a thing, that would be an effective action under the bylaws, the ordinance, even though it's only 3 out of the total 7 members of the board. Another reason to try to really attend. And that's just kind of a weird quirk. There's a weird thing with quorum and everything too, but doesn't come up often. Just kind of a please attend and let us know. Another important part of attendance to make sure everybody's voice is represented effectively. We've got some conflict of interest rules. Please ask me about that if you've got any questions and see any sort of potential conflict. People you know, business interests you might have. We've got some pretty specific, we've got some rules and I've thought about this quite a bit specifically with this board and then city boards generally. So any question at all, safest just to ask. I think more than anything else. And then we can approve these bylaws at the next meeting and changes can be made if we need to through a 2/3 majority vote of the board. That's how we set up most bylaws. If folks do have issues with them or have questions, obviously you can ask me now, or it's all very legal sort of stuff. So it takes a second maybe to digest too. We can email any thoughts to Sarah and let me know so I can try to make a reflective draft of the board's wishes at the next meeting so we can get this going a little bit. Any questions now, though, on any of the bylaw stuff? Yes.
You mentioned conflicts of interest. Please dig down into that a little bit. What do you mean? I know a lot of people. I'm not interested in showing favors to anyone, but what
No, and that's kind of it. So, and it's a very fact-specific question, which is for my pause, basically. But we're looking for kind of a substantial interest. So it's not just anybody you know that might possibly be on an application that comes before the board, because this is a world, I mean, in Wichita, most people probably know each other that's going to come before the board anyway. So that's not our standard.
about a financial
A bit more financial interest, but also though, if you've got like a relative applying, that might be something that we need to know about. So really, if you've got questions, I think we're probably going to, especially with this board, because we're reviewing financial considerations, we might have a lot of questions at first. Yeah, just ask and let's kind of get it all figured out and then everything can run smooth, I think. But really, we're looking for kind of a more significant, and sorry, I can't explain it a whole lot better. There's a few different ways we can access it. I don't want to waste time talking about conflicts here necessarily, but just if a relative or you've got some sort of financial interest that could be implicated, those are the really big things that what we're looking for. But yeah, default to asking me for now, at least. So the last thing I've got is, well, we've got election of chair and vice chair. And this was kind of up to the board. I wasn't sure if folks knew if they wanted to nominate each other or nominate themselves or run for the position yet, or if we've given that a lot of thought. This is something we can't do now, but might be a little bit easier to do after we put the bylaws in place next time. And Saban, I don't think you've been, you came in like right at the end swearing in. So I don't know if that would affect things too, because we don't have the full board seated. It doesn't, you could still have a quorum and take action and stuff like that. But just sort of comedy considerations and working together this first one. I just kind of wanted to leave some room for that before going into some more technical open meeting stuff at the end. Just if anyone has anyone thought about maybe being chair or nominating anyone yet, or maybe we should push that to the next meeting so we can kind of discuss that or give it consideration from y'all's seats.
I don't know if any of us have.
Yeah, okay.
From what I'm gathering here, so something that we.
That looks like a chair.
I respectfully decline.
But I do think it would be appropriate until you are actually, yeah, so that we could.
Yeah.
I think that would be most appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, that's generally how we try to do it too. This happens all the time. So, and again, if we needed to take some emergency action, we can do so without bylaws, without officers, things like that. So if something did happen before the next meeting, because we are in kind of a unique world of reviewing applications, they come in, we could do that if necessary. So we'll kind of push that to the next meeting as well. We'll kind of have a bylaws election sort of component, and hopefully it'll go smoothly and quickly if actually provided information effectively. So we'll see how that goes. Any other questions then at this point? Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about open meetings so we don't get ourselves in trouble, more or less. And I don't really have like slides on this exactly. I just wanted to talk about a few points because Kansas Open Meetings Act has a lot of different pieces that might affect the board from a legal perspective, but that's something we work a lot more in the law department on. The side of that we cover in particular is Kansas Open Records Act. So it's all about open governance. There's a couple complementary statutes at the state level that affect even city boards, other governmental entities, and just that they need to be open to the public. You all don't really need to worry about Open Records Act requests. That's something that we kind of process and handle a bit more, but something that we need to be cognizant of more as board members is Kansas Open Meetings Law. And there's a few different pieces of that I wanted to highlight today. The first is what we call serial communications, which I hinted at a little bit before. And I will send around some state materials to the board so everybody can kind of review more in depth if they want to later. But that gets very in depth when this board, I think, should focus on a few things. Serial communications, we don't accidentally have a board meeting when we don't mean to, and kind of that could have some other effects on actions taken by the board later, slow things down, affect our application review process, making sure we establish an agenda appropriately. And this is just kind of a broad statement of we do need to provide an agenda or notice to people of what meetings are. And we'll kind of, I think, figure out the mechanics as we go of providing effective notice for this kind of board where, again, we might have applications that come up a little bit more spur of the moment. And the last thing is I'll mention what executive sessions are. And this board has the authority sometimes to discuss matters outside of public view. I think that'll be relatively limited in this instance. It's usually more about like employee issues, or maybe if we're talking about students or minors or something like that. So confidential privacy concerns. There are some situations where purchasing property might come up and might warrant an executive session, but it kind of, it's not quite within the purview of this board, reviewing applications and making those decisions. But that kind of stuff is what might lead to an executive session for us. So serial communications, that's the big thing for us with Open Meetings Act. A meeting under the Kansas Open Meetings Act is any time that a quorum or a voting majority of the body gets together and has a discussion on stuff that could be before the board. Now, that's a really, really, really broad definition. So really, it's if we're four of us, accidentally run into each other or at some sort of housing or real estate conference, we need to avoid discussing anything that might be before the board. A really big thing that comes up now with digital technologies is if we've got an email that's maybe sent to the whole board, maybe it's from a concerned citizen or something like that, and we do not want to reply all. We do not want to reply to the entire board to have a discussion about business that could be before the board. The difficulty is then we did not have the discussion in public. It kind of taints our future discussions a little bit, and we need to unwind. And again, for this board's purposes, it really slows things down in a way that might affect our application reviews. So just if we get emails, try to reply singularly to Sarah, or if you've got a question for me, you can do that as well. You can talk to singular board members about stuff that comes up before the board, but I caution very much against that, because if you talk to one person and then you talk to another person, that counts. It's kind of like you talk to both of them at once. And then if we get a third person there, even accidentally, just, hey, I talked with so-and-so and so-and-so, we've got 4, that's the quorum and majority, and it really could affect things as well. And because I think we might have some interesting potential conflict of interest issues, given the way everybody has interest in the real estate market here, I think we just want to be very careful about discussing issues that might come before the board with other people on the board, except when we're at a meeting here and can kind of lay everything out publicly. Again, if you've got questions about that, please let me know. The big thing really, though, will be don't reply all to email. That's the thing that happens all the time that causes us some issue. And we can schedule meetings and stuff. There's like some exceptions and everything that we'll see as we come up. But please just generally do not reply all to emails, especially when community members email us or something like that too. The other part of that is making sure that we set up a notice. Oh, I will say too, there's technically a civil penalty under the Open Meetings Act of $500 if you violate it. And that can attach to board members. I say that only because it exists. That's not actually a way that it's enforced or anything like that. What happens is someone will file a complaint with the AG, and then if they determine that it was violated, then it unwinds the action more. There haven't really been any kind of like civil penalties or fines or anything like that. But I just want to at least mention that because, you know, want to lay out the whole landscape of potential legal liability. Couple other small things. POMA, the Open Meetings Act, doesn't actually require that we publish notice anywhere. It doesn't need to be in a newspaper, but we really try to provide as much notice as possible. We try to get the agenda out there with sufficient lead time for the public to know what we're talking about. We write it into our bylaws that really we try to stick to the agenda each meeting. You all can add stuff to the agenda at meetings. That's totally within your power. That's written into the bylaws too. But just we try to provide as much open notice to folks so there's more public participation. There are some rules about agendas, but those are all in our bylaws. Follow all those anyway. The last thing is about executive sessions. Again, this may not come up much, but if you do feel like there's an issue that has some privacy or confidential concerns, or you think maybe we as staff need to consider that, just let us know. And we can kind of consider whether an executive session might be appropriate. If you if you're very familiar with this or very much feel an executive session is appropriate, just let me know specifically. There's a specific motion that you need to make that identifies the reason that we're taking the executive session, a little bit of information about why we're using that justification for it. And then you always have to set a specific time that you're coming back to the public meeting so everybody knows when that kicks off again. But we've got that down kind of, just sort of a rote science a little bit. So, and it comes up a lot more at city council or maybe some other boards that consider employee issues especially. This probably will not be a big issue for this board, but again, wanted to mention it so everybody's got a full idea of the power and authority that we have on this board. That's really all I've got. Kind of, I know a lot of like legally sort of stuff, but ask questions, totally fine. I'll send some more information along, but thank you so much everybody for taking time and devoting some energy to this important endeavor. Thank you.
So who feels like they're drinking from the fire hose right now? It's a lot. And the nice thing is we've got a robust staff team who can really help to guide through a lot of this. I wanted to add on that one of the things within open meetings is that you will receive emails from me to the whole board, and that is allowed. But again, please do not reply all. If you have questions, reply just to me or start a new email thread. That's one of the biggest ways that I can help to address questions without us getting into challenges.
Since we're not on the board, we can't bother you.
And so it's our goal as staff, if somebody reaches out with a question and it seems like something that would be applicable to the board, I might turn around and send something out to everybody, but let's just not have conversation that way. And so, and speaking of questions, we have about 10 minutes. I know we have introduced a great deal to you all this afternoon. And so I want to see if there are any questions this afternoon, and also to make staff available. We actually do have another meeting that several of us are attending this evening, but we are available via email or other ways between now and when we meet again. And so I saw Valerie's hand.
Yes, will you share the slide deck?
Absolutely. In fact, that slide deck is already posted on our website. And so I will send out links. We currently have a website that really deals with the Affordable Housing Fund, and that's where a lot of this board information is living at the moment. The city also will be going through a website conversion to a new platform in the coming months. It's a platform I'm actually familiar with from a past experience. And so I see some opportunities to build out more robust usage of the website with this board. But I will send that link out to the board here after the meeting. And that contains our agenda, that contains our ordinance, the slide deck, and then we also record and then post these meetings for the record. So you can go back and you can watch these meetings at any point. Other questions today?
This comment, HGLP, for a while, it would be real handy if you could say Housing Development Loan Program.
Yes. So I will say I've been here 8 months and I am still learning to speak the language. So I will do my best to be a good interpreter as well. Yes, we know we're introducing a number of acronyms, and both for you as board members and the public who may be listening or following along, we want to make sure that we keep it where they can understand. And so if we get to speaking in acronyms too much, then slow us down.
Have been posted. I don't recall seeing for that particular program, how much is allocated on an annual basis.
Do you happen to have that at the ready, Logan?
$400,000 available for the multifamily rental. We have made. For which one?
Tell me how much?
400,000. What I was saying is we have made a conditional commitment out of that 400,000 in the amount of 150. So we still have about that we could be available. That said, we do anticipate revising this application and making additional funds available for multifamily here in the coming months.
And as we begin presenting items to you, we will be doing staff analysis that also helps to familiarize each of you with the program, with some of those constraints and structures, because it's a lot of information and that's part of our due diligence.
And the other thing I should mention is we actually have a housing development loan program, actually linked it. I meant to open it up in the presentation web page on our website. And so that's going to show you the application. That's going to show you what commitments are or have currently been made or what projects are currently under construction. And so that could be a good way for you yourself. And that'll be hyperlinked in the PowerPoint too.
It's okay if we refer people to these links.
Prospective applicants.
Okay, and I had clicked through that link. So again, I'm glad to copy each of these links and share so you can get a little bit more familiar with the programs as they're listed on the website. Once again, these are extremely complex programs. And so even our website lists more of a public-friendly version of the programs, but we'll be guiding you along each step of the way. There we go. Any other questions still today?
If you mentioned non-congregate shelter, what does that mean?
HUD defines non-congregate shelter as individual rooms that have private bathrooms but no kitchen facilities. Think hotel room or medical, nursing home room. Yeah, those kind of things.
So a single family.
I'm sorry.
Sally, how would that contrast with congregate shelter?
So your typical congregate shelter are generally large rooms, oftentimes with bunk beds or mats on the floor where people sometimes they're sleeping 4 inches away from the person next to them. Through COVID, HUD learned that people were having much better successes coming out of non-congregate shelter, where they could really focus on their personal issues, no matter what they were, and weren't always worried about their safety. Right. And so that's part of the reason why they are promoting that the home art funds can be used for the development of non-congregate shelter and cannot be used for congregate shelter. Although you heard me say in our dream project, we recognize there's a need for congregate shelter too. We just can't use that funding source for that particular piece of it. It caused some really interesting conversations around the different shelter types and housing and all of that. And there were discussions about needing 24/7 location where people could go or bring people who are experiencing homelessness. And we just don't have it in our community. And to try and hold non-congregate shelter units open doesn't make sense either, right? So you're going to have a period where people might need to go into congregate shelter, maybe move into non-congregate shelter while you try and get them housed, whether they need, documents, whatever it is to get them into housing. So interesting conversation to have.
One question that I would have at this point in time, Does the board have a preference for when we would meet again? Do we want to look at about a month from now and a similar time with perhaps a doodle poll to look at availability? Or do you guys want to make a decision here today?
Just going by what was written, third Tuesday at 4 o'clock.
Oh, and that's, yeah, and I'm sorry, that's just like some generic language and, yeah, sorry. It's not Tuesday, right? Yeah. Jeez.
No, it's third Monday.
1 hour meetings.
1 hour meetings.
Um,
Or
That's really up to you. I think our land bank, we budgeted an hour and a half and we tend to try to run about an hour. So we could do either direction.
Yeah, I consider time. Just so we don't feel rushed.
My schedule's pretty flexible, so. and
With the application, we have to consider while we're here.
Yes, you would deliberate while you're here. We would get you the information ahead of time to be able to read them, and then you come to deliberate and then make recommendations.
Recommend meeting next month. And does Mondays work for everyone, or what is this?
Yeah, it's likewise generally, yes. And
Work Monday. I'm pulling up the schedule for this room.
What I might,
We actually, yeah, probably would not be a good time to meet because we have HUD coming in for a pretty extensive compliance monitoring review that week.
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say, is that final week of July is not gonna be a good week for the staff team.
we could do the
That's the
31st.
5th. There's a 5th.
The 5th Monday, that might work. 31st?
And then we could do so are we thinking the last Monday of every month, or even if there's 5 Mondays or what do you mean?
Usually it's like they say like the 4th or the 5th for other boards, right? Or could you say the last?
It really varies. I mean, and
You guys think?
The only negative on Mondays is holidays tend to fall on Mondays.
Yeah.
The other thing I would question to Logan and Sally is in terms of turning around board action for council presentation, would we want to go a little bit earlier in the month so that we could use this final couple of Tuesdays in a month to turn it around? And the council meets first, second, and third Tuesdays of each month. And so we typically cannot run business on the 4th Tuesday. So if we went
Those
maybe
documents.
mid-month or so,
Yes.
but if generally late afternoon on a Monday is a good time for the board, then we could at least initially schedule our next couple of meetings and then solidify that with bylaw formation.
If we moved it back to 3 o'clock, no later than 5.
I think we could do that, and then we would have the Labor Day holiday, but that would be early in the month. So that at least gets us through the next couple of meetings, and then we can solidify. So 3 o'clock,
This is on the 31st of July.
I believe so, yes. So we are looking at 3 p.m. on Monday, July 31st for our next meeting. I may go ahead and schedule out toward the final Monday in August as well. And from there, we can see how things are looking through the remainder of the year. And then with the other board that I am the staff liaison for, the land bank, what we've tried to do is just to look at those regular meetings throughout the calendar year, and that helps in terms of reserving the room. With this board, we may add extra meetings kind of at the board's discretion and subject to applications that might be coming in. And so we are just after 5. Does anyone else have any pressing questions for this evening? Well, thank you so very much. I know it's been a lot of information, and so I really appreciate your willingness to learn and to serve in the ways that you are. And again, staff is wonderful about helping to explain and break it down, and that will be part of our job as we go forward. So with that in mind, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
That was Anthony motion and Stacy second. And would all in favor say aye? All opposed, same sign? We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Yeah.